Stay tuned. Coming up on this episode, I interview Chester Fire Captain Randy Hanifen as he shares the details of a near-miss event inside of a residential dwelling fire where, if circumstances were just slightly different, he might have been killed in a flashover. But first, let's pay the bills. Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 287 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I am your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from conducting a situational awareness program for industrial workers at the Safety Plus Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today's feature segment is brought to you by SimsUShare. SimsUShare is a simple and affordable way to help you develop and practice situational awareness skills. You can quickly build sims from your photos to simulate almost any kind of incident, including active threat scenarios. And the new SimsUShare Command Training Center now lets you conduct multi-company drills over the internet. So you can even run drills while your companies stay in station. Check them out at SimsUShare.com. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, my interview with Chester Captain Randy Hanifen, sharing the details of a near miss inside of a residential dwelling fire where circumstances were just slightly different. He might have been killed in a flashover. Hey everyone, Rich Gassaway here from Situational Awareness Matters show. We're in Atlanta, Georgia for Fire Rescue International. Had an opportunity to sit down with Randy Hanifen from Chester Fire in Ohio, and Randy had a near-miss event, and I reached out to him and asked him if it would be a chance that we might be able to get together here at FRI and record the interview to share with him. So he's taken time away from the conference to be able to share this near-miss experience live. So Randy, thanks for joining me.
All right, Rich. Well, thanks for doing this. This is great that you put these together and that we can share the information for these near misses and hopefully get the information to people so that they don't have the same experience.
Well, yours was a very significant near miss event. I mean, if circumstances were just a little bit different, you might just be a name on a plaque on a wall somewhere versus sitting here talking with me today.
Could be, yep.
So before we get into that event, Randy, let's start with talking a little bit about your department as it is today, as far as size of your community and stations and apparatus and calls and things, call volume, things like that. And then we'll go back to the day or the time when the near miss occurred, because it's been a few years ago.
Correct. So today we're a 5-station department covering a suburban area. We're about 20 miles north of Cincinnati in Chester, Ohio. We cover 34.5 square miles out of those 5 stations. Our on-duty minimum staffing is 22. We staff 3 on each of our engine/quints. 3 medic units are in service with a complement of 2 at a minimum. Sometimes we were able to run a 4th medic unit. And then we've got an on-duty, what we call a shift captain, which most people would call a battalion chief, riding in a car. Serves as a default incident commander for.
And that's your position?
That's my current position in the fire department, yes.
Okay. Is there only one of those on duty on a shift?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You said 5 stations. What's the 34 miles? What's the population?
We're roughly around 60 to 70,000. The unique part of our community is about half of it's not livable because it's large warehousing. To give you an example, we have one building that's 1.2 million square feet under one roof, has escape tunnels to meet all the requirements for exits. We've got a lot of mid-rise hotels, just based on where we are with the interstate system running through our community. We've become kind of a point where once you're out of the city far enough, that's the next place you can really hit a decent hotel. So those have populated over the last few years.
So your proximity north of Cincinnati, south of Dayton, I would assume makes it a pretty popular place to live and to do business with, being so close to both of those cities?
Yep. I think it's U.S. News magazine rates this as one of the top 100 communities in the nation every year for the last 5 or 6 years.
Nice.
And it's been a nice community, like you said. A lot of dual incomes, so our median income level's pretty high. Most of the houses are newer, and they're all typical lightweight construction, large open spaces. So that's a lot of our fire challenges. We can't stay in like a lot of people were used to in the 60s or 50s when they built the houses. Much more sturdy. So
yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning. How'd you get your start in this?
I started in 1994. My parents were involved in the volunteer fire service, and they wanted me to try it out. I was more interested in going to school to be an engineer. They set me down at my first co-op job, and I figured out that I was never going to be an engineer. That wasn't going to be for me, so now I'm an overly educated engineer that's in the fire department. So I started out with Mason Volunteer Fire Company. It actually borders the community I work in full-time now, in 94. Worked there for a few years part-time, and in 1998 got lucky enough to be hired with West Chester Fire Department. At the time, because we were growing, I was one of only 6 career people that we would have on duty a day, one in each firehouse, and one of our firehouses had 2 career personnel in it. Then the rest were supplemented. Part-time and paid on call both stayed in the station. Today we've transitioned out to where our entire on-duty force, if no one took off for vacations or on time off, could all be covered with career personnel. We still hold a small complement of part-time personnel to fill that in. So that's kind of the transition we've seen over that 20-year period.
So on the day that event occurred, Randy, what was the staffing like that day?
So as I talked about, we have always had the 5 stations, minimum of 3 personnel on fire apparatus. At that point, we only ran 2 ambulances. We did not have the on-duty shift commander, so it was our chief officers that either came from their office Monday through Friday or home in the evening. So we didn't have that position established. But I was in a house that had 3 on the apparatus. That was the only apparatus in the house, and it was in our first due district.
Okay. And was there an officer on duty in your station, or who was riding in the right front seat that day?
At that time, we didn't have as many promoted personnel. We had basically 1 promoted officer a day that ran out of our headquarters, and the rest were just either career personnel or part-time personnel that kind of worked out based on driving qualifications, experience, etc. Just in the house worked out who sat where.
Okay.
Obviously, over the 20 years, we're now much more formalized. A promoted officer in every firehouse, or an acting officer that ended up taking the test and passing to get on the acting list, an on-duty shift commander. So a lot of things have changed to formalize, but back when we were transitioning over from mostly a volunteer rural area, we didn't have a lot of those things in place.
So the on-duty officer that day was you?
No.
No?
I wasn't the promoted officer. I was just a career person. Like I said, we worked it out in the firehouse who rode where based on driving qualifications. The only true officer ran out of our headquarters, and
Okay.
I was at our Station 5 in the north part of town. So
Okay, so you were in the right front seat.
I was in the right front seat by default.
Okay.
So
And carrying the duties then of the company officer, even if not formally, even if not formally, you had that responsibility that day.
correct.
All right, crew of 3.
Crew 3.
And what set the call up as to how it came in and
it came in as a structure fire.
Okay.
Single family residential. Houses there were built in the 80s, 2-story, about 1,600 square feet. It wasn't at the edge of our district, but it wasn't right around the corner, roughly a 4-minute travel time. We were first due to that, like I said, a crew of 3. When it was dispatched, 20 years ago, I can't remember every specific detail, but
Sure.
Most of what we were focused on at the time was that it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was possibility of kids, bedroom mentioned at some point, so that was really the focus. And probably what you take home from this is, at 5 years, you don't go to fires every day. It's kind of a big event, and you get a lot of tunnel vision. And we've learned over the years that tunnel vision creates opportunities for things like this to happen. So.
And what was the experience level of the rest of your crew? You'd been on 5-ish years, firefighter level, sitting right front seat, de facto leader of the crew. Yeah, no, you've been very careful not to call yourself the officer, the crew leader as a firefighter level. The rest of your crew, what's their experience level like?
Roughly around the same, maybe a little less. One maybe had 2 or 3 years on, maybe one had 3 or 4 years on.
So all in all, you would say a younger crew.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
When we were transitioning and trying to put on-duty staffing in and hire a career, everybody was basically hired at age 21, 22, 23. So that was generally the makeup of most of your crews.
Okay. So you're en route to this call. What's your response time from wheels turning to wheels stopping? How much time do you have to think about things here?
I would roughly say we had 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay.
Like I said, it wasn't on the tip of our district, but it wasn't around the corner, so you had a little bit of time.
Okay. You guys were first in.
Correct.
And what'd you see?
Lots of smoke everywhere. Again, I would say 20 years ago we didn't have a lot of the education and knowledge that we are accustomed to today, where you're focused on reading smoke, you're focused on doing 360s, you're using tools like thermal imagers. A lot of those things just weren't either pushed, done, technology wasn't there, those sorts of things that we've made improvements on. So you had a lot of smoke coming out of a building.
Describe the house for me.
2-story residential, single family. It's a suburban area, so they're not next to each other. About 1,500 square feet. Like 99% of our houses, you open the front door, that's where the stairs are. This one was no different. So when we came off the truck, immediately took a line in, immediately went up the stairs.
No 360?
No 360.
Okay.
Nope. Like I said, that was a lot of the lesson learned.
Not surprising for that era of time. I think that it was probably less prevalent then. I think back to my time, and at that era, we just weren't really pushing
right
360 size ups. So the fact that you guys didn't do that, I want somebody to get in context. This was 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
So not unusual.
Not completely unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. So pull a inch and 3/4 line to the front door. 2 of you, right?
Yep.
The operator stayed at the apparatus.
Correct.
All right, and there's no other apparatus there yet.
No. We ran out of 5 stations. We covered 34.5 square miles. So you're not on top of each other, but you're not waiting hours. So based on where that was, lag time was probably a couple minutes, 3-4 minutes until the next apparatus came in. So you operate on your own for a little while. Now, depending on where it is in our jurisdiction, if you leave and go away from the firehouse, you could be on your own for extended periods of time, 7-8 minutes, but that wasn't the case with this.
Were you conscientious, and I know it's been 20 years ago, so I might ask you questions that you just don't have a memory of, but were you conscientious of how much time was going to pass, or estimated how much time was going to pass before the next company was going to arrive to be there to help you with something, be it a backup line or ventilation or search, or were you thinking, next end's going to be here in 5 minutes or less? Was that on your mind at all? Or
working fire, de facto officer. We don't in a suburban area make fires every day. My focus was pretty much on what we were doing
on the job.
Yeah, I mean that's now obviously 20 years later you got a much better understanding for that. But you're truly just trying to figure out what you're going to do.
So a couple of gung-ho, firefighter level, got report of possibility of victims, bedroom fire, 2-story house with the bedrooms upstairs. You've got what appears to be smoke coming from second story, smoke from the first story too?
Yeah, so there's smoke coming out of everywhere. We opened the front door, it was banked to the floor. So
okay. All right.
Lessons learned now, you kind of, looking back with all the smoke reading and everything else that, is available for people now, you obviously open that door, and if I'd have done it today, it would be significantly different thought process than what was used 20 years ago.
Right. So in the front door and up the stairs?
Yep.
Okay. And was your mission, do you remember, fire attack, search and rescue, or a combination of both?
A combination of both. We obviously intended to put the fire out if we came across it. I remember going up with the intent, to do that and to search. Unfortunately, the fire was on the first floor. We were on the second floor, so we were never going to put the fire out.
But you didn't know that?
We didn't know that.
Yeah, okay.
By no means did we have any idea.
Let me grab my pen here. Okay. All right, so now, is the fire on both the first and second floor, or predominantly on the first floor?
Predominantly on the first floor.
All right, so you're going above the fire.
We're going above the fire.
And you don't know it?
We didn't know it. We did.
This is going to get interesting.
We did soon.
Yeah.
So another company comes. They take a line around the back.
Okay.
Obviously.
Exterior around the back?
Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously, looking back now, knowing flow path and all those things, we were creating a flow path, and it wasn't in our benefit. So, all that heat's channeling up the stairs. We're in the hallway.
Front door's open?
Front door's open.
Mm-hmm.
Give it enough air it needs to build. And it's coming straight up at us. At some point, it gets hot enough. At that point in time
that crew's spraying water from the outside, right?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. So their ambition is to put the fire out, but in the process, what they're doing is maybe changing the pathway of the heat travel to now force that heat up the stairs.
Correct.
Where you guys are.
Correct. And at the time, you were always taught at that point, you don't put water on smoke. Now we obviously know just cool the environment.
Right.
So we're not flowing water. I did open the nozzle above our head to check heat because it was getting pretty unbearable. Open the nozzle, nothing comes down. That's at the point where we were in, understanding the science of firefighting. That told you it was time to make a decision to leave. So we found our way to a bedroom, found our way to a window, busted out the window and came out onto a front porch roof. Really wasn't, we got fortunate the porch roof was there. At that point in the game, we were coming out no matter what was on the other side of that. So if it was 2 stories down, it was a whole lot better than what was going on inside.
Wow. So you were just like full on, we're bailing out of this environment. We can't stay no matter what. So whatever was on the other side of that window, when you went out, you were going to either land on a porch roof or fall down from the second story window to the ground. And either way, your mindset was that would be better than where we're at.
Absolutely.
So it's pretty hot in there.
Very hot.
So both of you got out onto the porch roof.
Yep.
And are you burned?
We ended up with 1st and 2nd degree burns, wrists, ears, the places that didn't have the high level of gear protection. The other gentleman that was with me, his entire helmet was melted down on the top. Or both of our sets of gear were taken out of service that day. So. And
was this porch roof on the front of the house or the back of the house or side of the house?
Front of the house.
Front of the house. So was the incident commander in a position, well, let me pause. By the time you guys bailed out, were there other companies? Well, obviously there was at least one other company because they took a hose line around to the back. So the incident commander was there already, established command.
I think a lot of that was being set up at the same time all that went down. We weren't in the building a long period of time.
Okay.
So obviously not being outside, I don't know exactly when the commander got there, the other company got there, but I think most of those things were happening within a couple minutes of each other.
Okay. So command saw you guys come out onto the porch roof?
Yep. Ordered them to throw a ladder up to us. We climbed down ourselves, and we were out. So.
Okay. In the process of any of this, and I know it all happens relatively quickly, was there any radio traffic from you outward about the situation you guys were in, or were you just in full on, let's just get out of here?
If I remember right, we radioed we were coming out the second floor window. Obviously 20 years ago, the formalized processes of Maydays and, information and all those things that we're kind of accustomed to today weren't the norm then. Today, obviously, you would just call a Mayday, report what you're doing, but, there wasn't that formalized system that we're accustomed to today. So it was more of a, hey, we're coming out, and I think they just figured out when they saw us up on the porch roof, that's where we were coming out.
Yeah. And had there been no porch roof, you guys would have fell from the second story window to the ground.
Yeah.
And probably chancing injuries that were equal to or maybe even greater than the injuries you sustained from the fire.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. In one of my interviews, I had a firefighter that the crew of three, they got in a similar situation when they were on the first floor, and they bailed out a window that was on the first floor. So when their fall to the ground was only because there was snow, several feet of snow around this house, their fall to the ground was only about 3 feet. And the one firefighter fell in a way that created a shoulder injury that at the time that I recorded that show, he'd been off work 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Just from the injury from the fall, not the injuries from the burn. And he said, he kind of laughed about it. He said, I only fell like 3 feet, but the way I fell onto my shoulder just ripped things up so bad that it's been 2 years, and they weren't even sure at that time if he was going to return to work. So you imagine now falling, from 2 stories, and you might say, well, my plan would be to land on my feet. But the truth of the matter is, when you're coming out that quick, under those circumstances, and the momentum of however your body swings and turns and shifts, you could land on your feet, you could land on your back, you could have landed on your head. And really, as you said, being anywhere outside of that room was better than anywhere inside that room.
Yes, and at the time, we obviously didn't know about the flow path and the science that we know today, where you can go in a bedroom, shut the door, you probably could stay there for 5 or 10 minutes and have a very controlled way out, getting a ladder up, do those sorts of things that we now know and are common practice. At that time, it wasn't anything that we had available to us to know those things. Right.
We didn't know what we didn't know then.
Correct. Yeah.
And we look back now to then, and we can almost semi laugh at ourselves for what we did then, because we just didn't know any better compared to what we know now with the introduction of science and technology that makes us smarter about finding ourselves in positions like that and how to get ourselves out of positions like that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because if somebody's watching this show and thinking this is an event that happened to you last year, they need to know this is, reiterating, this is 20 years ago, and it was the norm. I mean, what you're describing is, I see me, and I'm a little bit older than you, but I see me in the very same circumstances. Although what happened to you hadn't happened to me, I could see the setup very easily for having that happen to me. Sure. in very much the same way. No 360s, no knowledge of flow paths, and the whole circumstance is so eerily familiar to me. But what scares me most, Randy, is there's still a lot of fire departments that have not embraced the science, have not embraced the technology, and are still in the same position to do the very thing that you did 20 years ago, that you can say, well, we'd never do it that way today. There's still some organizations out there doing it that way today. So this is not a lesson of history. This is a lesson from fire departments even in modern day that have not yet evolved to the understanding that you now have that says we would never do that way again. There's some that still just aren't there yet. So these lessons are really important for them to hear how these things happen, because I think there are many organizations that today that very thing could happen in a fire department today. Now, when this was done and you got down the ladder, how much time do you think you had between bailing out and surviving and not bailing out and not surviving? What I often talk to about, like, windows of opportunity. We have these windows of opportunity that are closing. One of them is the window of opportunity of our survivability. So when you're in that environment with those changing conditions, the window for your survivability is closing. At some point you bailed out the window, but how much time do you think you had before that window of opportunity would have closed on you and your outcome would have been catastrophic instead of what it ended up being?
Obviously, so we didn't have the science we had at that time, but we went and did a review of the run, pictures of the events, etc. And based on where the heat line is in the hallway, on the second floor, bedroom conditions, all those things, just taking a wild guess at it, you're 30 seconds to a minute between, a really bad outcome and what did happen to us. So.
Well, if your partner's helmet had already melted and you guys had bailed out, I mean, it clearly was on its way to those opportunistic windows closing on the two of you. And when the helmet's melted, it's not going to be much more time before the gear is going to denigrate to the point where it's not going to be you're going to not be in a survivable environment.
Yeah. Our gear was taken out of service that day. Mine passed test to go back in. His was removed from service permanently. So I mean, there was a good amount of damage done to his gear, being the second person out the window.
Did you and him at any point have a conversation with each other, like, oh man, that's some crazy stuff just happened there, or
we're still friends today?
I mean, how does that sound? When at some point the two of you got to look eye to eye and say, we cheated the devil there, or did you? I don't know. Maybe you didn't even acknowledge it.
We are still friends today. We still do some of the same stuff. He's hired in another department, a few departments over. His description of what went down that day and how we behaved is significantly different than I remember. He seems to think I was the calmest person on the planet. We were going to leave in an organized fashion. That was nothing what went through my head.
Well, at least if you were looking that way to the outside, you probably gave him a sense of calm.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm glad that's how it looked to you, but
it's kind of like that old saying, like when you see a duck on water, the duck above the surface looks calm, but down below the feet are going 1,000 miles an hour. Oh shoot! Well, good on you that you portrayed, at least to him, that sense of calm and collectedness. And okay, let's go in here and we're gonna go out this window. I can imagine how the two perspectives are so different, from his view of you of the outside and your view of you from the inside.
Oh yeah.
At any point did you, we didn't talk about family, but back then you were, I don't know, 21 or 22.
Yep.
But so I don't know who you had in your life that you would call important to your life, and we don't have to go into the detail of that. But did you at any point come home to the ones you love and tell them, hey, something happened today that really could have been tragic? Did you tell them, or did you just
we don't really put it that way. We just tell them we might have came out the building a different route and
went in one way, come out another. Right, all turned out okay.
All turns out okay.
So you really didn't share with anyone just truly how close that event.
No, and I think you
came
shield
to-
your loved ones from what does go on in our profession. So
Yeah. Yeah, I did one interview with a fellow who had a very significant near miss, and I asked him. I said, "Did you have a conversation with your wife when you got home about that?" And he said, "No." And he said, "In fact, I've still not told her about it." And I said, "Well, this podcast is going to be publicly available, so you might want to, when the show is done, sit down, have a little conversation with her." And he says, funny thing, while we're recording it, she's already came to the door. He was in a little office in his house. She's already came to the door with her arms folded and leaned up against the door frame and gave me a couple of hairy eyeball looks because she was hearing the things that I was saying to you, and she was giving me the "why don't I know about this" already look.
that she knows roughly what went on, 20 years later. But yeah, I think you share enough details that they know something went on, but you obviously don't want them to think that as you leave every day. So
let's fast forward to the modern day, and if you had an event like that today, I know you're in a different capacity now as the shift commander. But if you were at the company level, say still today, with the advancements of technology and the advancements of science and the advancements of the way we do our training and incident command and radio communications, and how would that event look different today than it did 20 years ago? What are some of the things you'd say, well, Rich, we do everything very different today? What would very different look like and sound like if that were to happen today?
Well, one of the things is, as you're going through and training your company officers, as a firefighter, you're all about going through the front door, doing what you can as quick as you can do it. You're really responsible for yourself most days.
Can you hold on a second? Ladies, we're videotaping here. Would you mind? That's okay. Thank you. So I'm going to back up and say, based on the modern day. Okay. Randy, that event happened 20 years ago. So, based on what we know now with science, technology, communications, incident command, what would that event look like today compared to how it looked 20 years ago? What would you do differently now that you'd kind of look back and just kind of roll your eyes that you did things that way then? How would it look today?
So obviously we have the advancement of knowing many things, and whether it's programs like this, the near miss reporting system, whether it's reading NOSH reports, we've done a good job to develop practices that should hopefully keep us out of doing these things. And one of the big things is getting that 360 complete. We've heard about many people crawling over top of fires that were in basements, and nobody knew that there was a walkout basement you could go into. We obviously have all the knowledge of flow path and how the science of creating flow path and how we interact with the building. So as we open different doors, windows, etc., coordinating ventilation and fire extinguishment, all those things that we've gotten, the ability to go around with a tick and use that to kind of see where the fire is in the building, even if it's nothing but smoke on the outside. So there's a whole lot of things you would do different, and I think while that technology's there and while some of those practices are there, I think the big thing for company officers to recognize is we're all excited to go in and do the job that we were called there to do, but as the company officer, you got to step back, take the 30 seconds, make sure you're getting as much information as you can, putting all that together to make the best choice you can based on a risk-benefit analysis. And as I've explained to some of our crews, as a firefighter, your risk-benefit analysis looks considerably different than the fire chief's. And as you continue to progress up that, that risk-benefit analysis kind of plays out a little different. As a firefighter, you're kind of responsible for yourself. As a company officer, you're responsible for a crew. You get to the shift commander, you're responsible for everybody we invite. And then, you get to the fire chief, he's responsible for everybody on the department. So, that risk-benefit analysis is done at every level, but as you continue to progress up through the ranks, it takes on a kind of a different fold.
Would you say that your company officers are better prepared today for how to do size ups and how to make fireground decisions than you were then?
Sure. A lot of the things, are more formalized. There's a lot of training programs out there that probably weren't available. But, I think two things, you have for you is, I can look back after 20 years of studying things day in, day out and have a completely different perspective on what I had at a 5-year point in a career, as well as over those 20 years. We've done well as a fire service to develop a lot of those things based on seeing events like this occur and going back and figuring out, well, what went wrong and what can we put in place to make that. And while you say, do we have it available? Certainly we do. We're probably at the point in the fire service of information overload. But as you talked about earlier, there's some departments that would still do things the same way because they haven't progressed, they haven't embraced. So while I say it's there, we still have cultural issues, we still have departments that don't want to move forward. So obviously if someone's watching this podcast, they've probably passed that. Hats off to them. Go share it with somebody else isn't making that transition.
Yeah. So for those departments that aren't quite there yet, they're doing things today as you had done them 20 years ago. Give them some tips. Give them some ideas, some things that they should consider doing differently so that their people aren't in a situation that the window's closing in 30 seconds to 1 minute they're going to have a catastrophe if they aren't lucky enough to have a window to bail out to onto a roof. So what are those tips?
So the tips is no fire behavior. Know how all the flow path and the NIST studies, how all that works within the buildings in your district. Know your district. Know that you've got to do that 360. Know that when the incident commander gets there, he needs to do the 360. When the safety officer is assigned to the event, he needs to do the 360. So you're constantly seeing that. One of the positions I assign right off the bat, as soon as I get another command officer there, is I assign him to the Charlie Division because it's a part of the building I can't see. So that we have eyes on that building all the way around it. So as a condition is changing, we can relay that to the crews inside because all they can usually see is the smoke in front of their face. They don't have the advantage to see how that fire is progressing, and we're able to now know how to read smoke throughout the building. We're able to have that technology of the thermal imaging cameras on the outside to kind of give us some of those heads up that we have the advantage to today.
Yeah. And the modern lessons of flow path would certainly be part of what they need to understand better too.
Absolutely. I opened the door today and it's banked down onto the first floor all the way to the ground like it was. I have a completely different outlook on where that fire is going to be than I did 20 years ago with the tunnel vision of only bedroom, go, go, go.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful story with some powerful lessons. Let's come into the modern day Randy Hanifen, from when you were that firefighter in the de facto company officer position. What does your career progression look like since then, and some things that you've accomplished in life since then?
So I've been fortunate. I've gotten 2 tracks. I had a great mentor, Dr. Bill Kramer. I was able to kind of do a dual track. So currently now I work as the shift captain for West Chester Fire. I go to work every third day, and then my 2 off days I'm a full-time professor for the American Public University system. So I've got basically a dual track. I also own a consulting company that does analysis of fire organizations and making those transitions. I say I got bored in the firehouse. I got lucky. I was early on in my career, there was a person sitting down just reading some books, and I asked what he did, what he was doing. He said, well, I'm going to college. I had obviously given up college in the engineering field after a year, so I was able to go in and learn, hey, that was the University of Cincinnati. He hooked me up with that, and I joke that, I didn't like watching TV, so 13 years of school later, I ended up with a doctoral degree. So,
And what did you do your doctoral research in?
So my doctoral research, because my degree was in business management with a concentration on Homeland Security, when I was promoted in 2000 to lieutenant, I was put in charge of our special operations. So I'd always had a connection to our EMA. I had started our county's technical rescue team. I had become a task force leader for FEMA's Ohio Task Force 1, so my dissertation focused on the connection between the local fire department and the emergency management agency and what knowledge, skills, and ability it took to collaborate. So if you read disaster management, everything is about collaboration. If you look at what we're trained to in the ICS field, everything is ICS command and control based. So I took and learned what elements of collaboration were needed, and then I compared it to the current curriculum at the time for the ICS to see what the delta was. And obviously there was a huge gap there in making that transition, so we could kind of understand it wasn't the individual's fault, because that was the other thing I was able to learn out of the dissertation, that people only stayed in a certain position within an organization for a certain period of time, and their likelihood of having a federally declared disaster, and a disaster that would meet that criteria, was out to many decimal points of a possibility to even have. So they would never see that disaster before. They would never have the ability to be in that experience before. So literally every disaster they go to is their first at that level.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, let's swing back just a moment and tell me a little bit more about what you do in the consulting side of things. You kind of listed it, but you went really quick. So let's break that down a little bit. If somebody was interested in having you do some consulting type work for their fire department or their community, what are the things that you do for them?
I was fortunate, like I talked about, a great mentor of Dr. Bill Kramer. He's owned his own consulting company for years. I've worked with him for years, and as he calls it, kind of transitioning out due to age, I'm kind of transitioning in, so we've kind of picked up the ball where that's at. But a lot of our work goes into, and we still do today, we always work together. We're out analyzing organizations. So if a department wants to go from volunteer to part-time paid, or part-time paid to career, what does it take to make that happen? If they're going to add stations, well, not only do you need a station, but you need, the personnel that go on it. You need the apparatus. That affects the budget. That affects, the overall community. And we put reports together to help organizations. So one of our bigger projects we completed recently, we were in Western Massachusetts. Everything was done by town. They didn't have counties or larger organizations. Well, each town was not big enough to afford its own fire department paid. They all had volunteers. Well, as the volunteerism declines in the country, we were able to figure out how to take the law that their school districts were built around and create a fire district that would overlay on top of all the current volunteer fire organizations, so they could pool money together enough to afford paid on duty personnel while preserving the volunteers, because those that still wanted to volunteer, you certainly didn't want to ask them to leave, but the increased call volume, the training requirements, all those things that everybody knows goes on nationally in the fire service, just kind of doesn't allow the volunteer forces to keep up anymore.
Yeah. If somebody wanted to find you to engage you to help them, where would they find you at?
So we got a website, www.fireemsconsulting.com, all one word spelled out. Or probably the easiest way, you can go onto the website, you can see the services offered, but truly what we believe the best way to go about it is to start with an email, start with a phone call, and we can sit and figure out truly what you need, truly where you want to go, and that makes a much better than just a standard, we'll send you an RFP and 10 people bid on it. It's more personalized. It gets you down to what you truly need answered for your community, because each is going to be slightly different. There's a lot of the same measurement factors that go into that, but each one's going to be at a different point in life and want to go to a different point in life. So probably the easiest way is my email. I made it pretty easy. It's randall@hanifen.org, so just an @ sign between the two names, .org at the end. And then we'll put up on the slide at the end contact phone numbers, websites, email, make it so they can get that if that's good for you.
Okay, it is. Randy, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and talking about your near-miss event.
All right, Rich, I appreciate what you're doing. This is great for firefighters to be able to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain Randy Hanifen, for sharing your near-miss story with our listeners and viewers. The Situational Awareness Matters show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories, just like the one you got done listening to. When I'm on the road delivering classes on situational awareness, I often ask attendees about their near-miss events that they've had, and they have shared some amazing stories. Those stories motivated me to launch this podcast so that those lessons could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SA Matters Radio, and our companion video program, SA Matters TV, on YouTube, along with other videos we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 800,000 downloads. I'm so thankful for your support, and I feel so honored to be able to provide the platform for these amazing stories to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor. Please subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search SA Matters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version, subscribe to SA Matters TV on YouTube. And if you find value in the show, I would really appreciate it if you would give the show a rating and write a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show, but more importantly, your feedback inspires me to want to work even harder for you.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they respond to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that you just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. But I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
Since 2007, Situational Awareness Matters instructors have helped over 1,300 organizations and have trained more than 80,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery process operators, and so many more. If you or someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you. I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their employees. The Lansing Fire Department in Lansing, Michigan, the Ingham County Fire Chiefs Association in Michigan, and the Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the Safety Plus Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. As this episode airs, I am in the middle of a 6-week sabbatical from all presentations. I did this to do what Dr. Stephen Covey would recommend as sharpening the saw. and focusing on my personal growth and development. So I recorded this episode for you in advance before I left. If you're interested in attending an upcoming event, here is where we're going to be on the horizon when I finally get back from the sabbatical and back to work. On October 15th, I will be presenting at the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association Conference in Peoria, Illinois. On October 20 and 21, I will be at the Clearwater Regional Fire Service in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta. On November 14 through 17, I will be at the International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officer Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. On November 23rd, I'll be at the County of Grand Prairie Fire Services in Grand Prairie, Alberta. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to the samatters.com website and scroll down the homepage till you see a red tab that says Upcoming Events Schedule. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage and I will give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there are several ways you can do that. Check the show notes for how to get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, by subscribing to the SA Matters podcast show, by subscribing to the SA Matters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to be better decision makers under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 287 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, West Chester Fire Captain Randy Hanifen. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Sims You Share. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, organizations, and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted live stream training programs where I come to your organization live via the internet and train your employees. Thank you to the more than 3,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I receive from Academy graduates is just amazing and extremely humbling, and I thank you for that. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.